What's up, folks? Casual Dad with our next Warhammer Combat Cards Warlord Guide. Ooh, got it. We're getting into the punchers here. We're getting into the upper 30 point, upper 30 point cards that hit a little bit harder, but are in kind of an awkward spot. So in the 40s and 50s, you get the Warlords who you take that Warlord to take that Warlord. In the middle, you get these kind of funny ones who have much better stats than the 20s and maybe early 30s, but so they're more expensive. So you have to take these guys on purpose. But then they end up having better stats-ish, not as much as the more expensive ones, but they usually have really, really powerful abilities. Talked before, a lot of the most powerful warlords, in fact, probably most of the most powerful warlords in the game, are in this 32 plus point range. You've got some in the cheaper range, but most of the really heavy hitters are going to be in the 30s. So we're looking at Helbrecht, High Marshal of the Black Templars, comes in with a pretty intimidating stat line, 34 points, has that 315 base health, which is not great, but it's not bad, has a ranged attack, but then also has a very high melee attack, especially on top of his Inspiring Presence, and Furious Charge, which he's legendary, so that can go up to rank 4, and also because of his trait, which is Mark of the Exemplar. Each time a friendly Space Marine kills an opponent with a melee attack, it gains a Mark of the Exemplar. For each Mark of the Exemplar, increase all attacks of friendly cards by 15%. Two things I want to highlight about this. One, there is no cap. Two, this combos with all of your other bonuses. So if you have Inspiring Presence or some ready bonuses, that will all stack and make a pretty devastating thing. Three, your card has to kill something with melee. So you want your starting very high melee cards to be kind of the backbone of your deck. And four, the card that does get that kill has to stay on the board. So that's the thing about Helbrecht that holds him back compared to some others, is that only the cards that have the kill have this bonus. So it doesn't apply to all your cards that are on the board when a kill is made, only the card that made the kill, and if that card dies, you lose a lot of your bonuses. So he's kind of a funny one. When you build your deck, you want to have cards that hit really, really hard in melee, but also have some staying power. So you want some Medicae in there. You can throw in some Deathblow in there to kind of fill the deck, but Medicae, Fear, Furious Charge, and of course Deathblow is an excellent one if you get to that. I'm so close. Just because you end up with really, really high melee attack stats over the course of the game, and it can really help to push through to the end. And Helbrecht himself is no slouch. One thing I enjoy about him is he's one of the warlords that can hang in the game himself. So when he deploys the Furious Charge, which can get a kill, so he can get his Mark of the Exemplar, his first Mark of the Exemplar on deployment, in addition to his Inspiring Presence, which will then also stack with any other Mark of the Exemplars already on the board. The other thing I want to be sure to highlight, though, is that you only gain a Mark of the Exemplar for a kill done with a melee attack. So you really want to be careful putting in cards with ranged attacks. This guy can be an issue because as he gets those Berserk, as he builds up his attack value with Berserk, he does end up with actually a pretty scary ranged gun, and likewise for this guy as well. So these two are both a little bit iffy, where you can accidentally take out low health cards and end up losing out on a Mark of the Exemplar that you quote-unquote should have had. So I really do recommend doing a pretty narrow, barbaric, all-melee, punchy Helbrecht deck, with some obvious key pieces being, of course, Cogfang over here. Very punchy card for 8 points. Doesn't have the durability you want in this deck, but you've got some other cards that can kind of make that up. Of course, shields are really, really good here. Let's look at some of the top shielded cards. Asterath. One of the things I should pause and highlight here is that Helbrecht is arguably the single best warlord in the game for max level campaigns. When your cards are max level, he is terrifying, especially if you have some of the scarier legendaries like Asterath the Grim, who at top level is a monster who will drop on the board and kill something with 160 or less health on the drop, and then can follow it up with a melee attack as well with his Mark of the Exemplar already triggered, in addition to any Inspiring Presence you may already have on the board, or Mark of the Exemplar you already have on the board. He is crazy good. Likewise, Chaplain Morris. Mine is very low level, but for the same reasons. You've got that combination of Fear and Furious Charge on a legendary chassis with good hit points and good melee stat. He is riskier because he does have that ranged attack that is quite high, but it's probably worth the risk. He's quite good. Also, Furnos here, the Chaplain with Regen. Regen's another really good piece to kind of keep your stuff on the board so that it benefits from the trait and then keeps on going. These two here are some of the absolute best cards you can have because they are both very hard hitting, especially with that big game hunter there, and also have shields. So legendary cards with shields, and he's got Inspiring Presence. Legendary cards with shields and good health are really, really strong pieces in a Helbrecht deck. I know some folks have, I think Shinto Bean in particular, said this is like the worst card he's ever seen. I totally disagree. At high level, this guy can hit with his Furious Charge, do a bunch of damage, get his Mark of the Exemplar, and then follow up with a precision shot to do a bunch of damage. It seems counterintuitive, but he's a really, really strong piece in a Helbrecht deck, in part because he does have that max level Furious Charge and good stats and very, very high health. Another thing I like to mention is that even though I say you don't want ranged or psychic attack stats in here, you want it to be all melee, it is important to note that the Mark of the Exemplar does also boost the attack value of non-melee attacks. So if you do end up running a balanced deck with ranged or psychic attacks in there, it will benefit from Helbrecht's trait. A couple other people to point out, actually all of these, like the beefy hitters, some of the biggest, swingiest, coolest characters in Space Marines are really, really good in a Helbrecht deck. This guy here, excellent piece because it has Furious Charge and great stats. Of course, Fear being a thing to keep things on the board and a really high melee stat. Mephiston is another great piece, despite probably accidentally killing all kinds of stuff with his other attack types. Then, what do you got? You got Regen. Yeah, not a bad pick. This guy recently got buffed to the point where it's worth considering, especially with those hit points. If you have a high level of this guy with decent regen, why not? And then, of course, Calgar, having the combination of a very high melee stat and Furious Charge and a lot of hit points. Excellent pick to consider. And again, you've got shields over here. On Arjak. Arjak you may struggle a little bit with early on because his melee attack is fairly low for the other cards in this cost range, but having those shields and the high hit points does kind of help him make sense in these decks. Of course, Tyberos has the magnificent combination of Fear and Berserk, which is just a magical combination for Helbrecht if you can keep him alive long enough. And then, of course, Moloch, the Minotaur's Chapter Master, is a really exceptional piece, especially once you get those shields up. But his base melee is very, very good. In addition to that Furious Charge, he's a terrific piece. Now, as you can see, as I was running through these cards, you are going to fairly quickly run out of deck points. So Helbrecht decks do tend to be somewhat thin, which again is good because you want your cards to benefit from the most of from his trait, and you want to focus on cards that will stay on the board longer. You don't want to throw in cards that are just going to die quickly. So with that, we're going to go ahead and play 2 games, and we'll see how this goes. And again, this is one where I play Helbrecht a lot in the max level campaigns, where all of your cards are max level. Most of the cards that I want to do, that I really want to put in his deck and really benefit from him the most, are fairly low level. So you could call this deck a wish list deck or a bookmark future deck. It's a deck that I expect to perform better later than it does right now. And I'm not actively laddering with my Space Marines, but they're still at a decent level right now. Ooh, I sure wish I'd done that thing. That's right. Oh, that'll work. I'm looking to charge up Blackmane's Berserk over here, so that's why I was saying I should have put him in front of the tank, but of course you don't know that until the last deploy, and I'll just kill the tank anyway, so it doesn't matter. And this is perfect. I'll take 10, 20 damage, and then get plus 18 to my base melee stat in addition to the Mark of the Exemplar. So I'm going to be taking a little bit of damage, but you can already see the melee deck charging up a little bit. Oh, that's great. Look at those look at that 1. That is perfect. Yeah, that is what you want to see. You want to take, on your Berserk cards, you want to take 1 to 5 damage every single turn. So they keep their health, basically, but then they also just build up these insane levels of damage bonus. And another thing about that, the reason you want good base melee, excuse me. Oh, that's great. The reason you want good base melee attacks on your cards that you put in your Helbrecht deck is because the Mark of the Exemplar, and I'm going to kill this guy in ranged, bummer. And I killed that guy in ranged, bummer. Is because Mark of the Exemplar is a % boost, not a flat boost. So your cards that already have a high melee stat will benefit from it the most, and your cards whose melee stat is somewhat middling, you're barely going to notice the difference. So even here, I mean, that's a noticeable increase, but it's only plus 8 for each kill. That does stack, so as I get more Marks of the Exemplar, they will start getting more attack value faster. So this guy went from, I think, high 50 to an 85, which is no joke. This guy, of course, with the addition of Berserk, has gone up to 226. Yeah, but he's about to die. Well, not that time. Okay, he is not. He's going to kill something else in ranged. So you can just see how absurd these things get over the course of this. With the Mark of the Exemplar and Berserk, they can become quite scary very quickly. This guy is sitting at 85. And I don't think I lost a card, which is perfect. That's what you want. You want to build up your max bonuses across the deck as you play. So Helbrecht is another one you can make your thinnest possible deck with your hardest hitting melee cards with the highest level of fear, and just roll with it. And then, of course, Helbrecht himself, as I said, not being no slouch in combat, when he comes out, you'll have some Mark of the Exemplar built up, unless you get wiped, which is not good. But you should have some Mark of the Exemplar built up to where when Helbrecht hits the board, he makes a big splash, even if he's relatively low level. Now, one thing I should highlight here that's a challenge with Space Marines in general, but particularly challenging with Helbrecht, who really, really likes those legendary and unusual cards, is that Space Marines have a huge card pool. They just have so many cards to choose from, which is good for variety, but actually really bad for kind of collecting and leveling the game. Because unless you're very, very diligent and dedicated about collecting Space Marine cards, your cards are going to level extremely slowly. Just because you have so many, anytime you get a random Space Marine drop, it could be for anything. And probably not the thing you want. Oh yeah, there we go. Oh, alright. And probably not is a bit strong, but there's a very good chance that the cards you get are not the ones you were hoping for enough of the time where it's going to have an impact. Like, I've had Brother Adremo for literally years, and I only just got him to trait level 3. Whereas in my other factions, most of my cards were at trait level 3 ages ago. And newer cards, too, so not just the cards I've had for a while. So that is definitely something to keep in mind with Space Marines, but again, especially Helbrecht, because he really, really likes legendary and rare, or legendary and epic cards. And I should go ahead and highlight here, I kind of touched on it, but wanted to go ahead and say it a little bit more clearly. Deathblow is impacted by Mark of the Exemplar. So if I have 3 stacks of Exemplar over here on Cave and Shrike, he still will supercharge the Deathblow of Seterax over here on the edge. Which is awesome. And we're not going to see that yet, but it's going to come up. And I'm not actively laddering with Space Marines right now, so you're going to see me getting pretty favorable matchups. But this is not a slouch of a deck. This may end up being, well, nope, it's not. I said may end up being challenging, but that right there is why you can include an 11-point Deathblow and not feel, quote-unquote, feel bad about it. Which, of course, you should never feel bad about it. Whatever. But there is some strategy involved. You want to make sure to deploy your Furious Charges at times where they'll be the most impactful. The best is if there's an injured card that you can take out on your turn, because then you can follow up with a devastating attack that hits off lane. But of course, that's not always an option. And taking out an opposing card on their turn is also good. And I don't think, I may have missed it, but I don't think I've seen any of my cards get a kill with a ranged attack this game. Shrike is probably about to die before he would. But you can see his ranged attack is pretty significant now too, so that's definitely something to watch when you're kind of figuring out where to place your cards. Oh, you poor fool. And this Asterath is only level 4. He's very low, but he's already sitting at 106 melee damage, and he's going to get a little bit more from Adremo over here. 116, yep. And then another. So you can see just how devastating these cards can get to be, even at quite low level, even not the most favorable matchup. But hopefully this does highlight the power of Helbrecht. And at some point, when all my cards are super powerful, I will go ahead and demonstrate just exactly how terrifying he can be at top level. Or we've already seen the max level campaigns, you already know. But he's a really, really good warlord to keep in your pocket and work on. I do go a little bit back and forth on whether he is more powerful than Azrael. And we'll take a quick look at Azrael, who's also, I already did a guide for him, but I'll probably redo that at some point. Helbrecht does compare directly with Azrael. Azrael is more expensive, but does not require getting kills to trigger his bonuses, which is good. So the bonuses are lesser, but they apply to all of your cards on the board, so if one is removed, it doesn't take away the bonus you've already built up. He comes in a couple points more expensive, but I believe his max stats are a little bit better. Yeah, they're similar. It doesn't have Furious Charge, isn't able to build up the same volume of attacks, but is again attack type agnostic and can continue building up an attack boost even if he's not getting kills. So it's a little bit hard to say which one is better, but they're both kind of in the same vein. If you really like melee, Helbrecht all the way. If you like melee but also enjoy other attack types, consider Azrael. And then if you just really, really don't like melee, Azrael, of course, is the obvious choice. But yeah, so I just kind of go back and forth on that. I want to see both of them at higher level in my personal collection at ladder with them. I've actually had quite a bit of success laddering with Azrael at level 2, so that does say something about him, but not that much success. So anyway, getting distracted, that was your guide to Helbrecht, High Marshal of the Black Templars. Hopefully this was helpful, and yeah, let me know what you think.